I mean, I've told a lot of folks this, but everybody you read again and again, the only thing that America's ever given to the world in the world of art is jazz and rock and roll. And I think, no, there's three things in comic books. That's a true American medium. It's totally invented here, created here. You know, the whole aspect of it started here.
We always felt in the field that comic books would be safe from being really destroyed by TV and movies, even though TV had hurt comic sales probably starting in the 50s, as long as comics could do things the movies couldn't.
In the old days, with no special effects and very little budget, they did really bad adaptations.
Things films like The Matrix, which is not a comic film, but those guys are comic buffs. The Wachowski brothers are huge comic fans, and you know they broke ground for all these other comic films that are coming, and they said that. Plenty of interviews with the Wachowski brothers. It's just like, you know, we always wanted to see a good comic book movie made, and we just did it. You know, and all three of the films they created technology to make it, and all three of those films have been gone into X-Men, Hellboy. There was stuff used in Hellboy that came straight out of Matrix.
A lot of times, these adaptations, when you first bring a superhero to film, they have to have they have the baggage of having to tell the origin story of how the superhero became a superhero.
Like the Daredevil movie only takes place in like a 2-year period of what the book was, and they ignore the other 15 years of the character.
Daredevil had a nice feel to it and everything, although it seemed like Elektra just got in the costume and got killed 3 minutes later. But that's the trouble with trying to do it in 2 hours.
X-Men's doing well because they made 3 movies, and they kind of condensed a large chunk of the story over 3 movies in 6 hours.
I think they've done the best when they stay as close as possible to the original material.
And you want to have a movie that, even if you're not into the comics, that you'll go back and watch again and again.
The original Superman was probably the best. Oh yeah. If you look at it, he's the farm boy. They show him in Smallville. They did it really, really well right from the beginning.
I think that Spider-Man is a great example of an adaptation that really worked.
The most wonderful thing I've ever seen in film this year was American Splendor. It totally caught me off guard because it was a comic book.
I perfectly loved Hellboy. Was it perfect adaptation? No. Was it pretty close? Yeah, I think it was pretty close.
I think the most faithful so far has been Hellboy.
But whenever they start getting too adventurous and putting their own spin on it, I think they really, go astray and they're not nearly as good. And it's always because they think they know better. When I was working on the Conan movie with the producer, Dino De Laurentiis, who had bought out the rights for the second movie, when my partner, Jerry Conway, and I were working on him, he didn't want to hear our ideas, even though by then I had written thousands of Conan pages, and I was mainly hired because of that, and read everything, and so forth, and been a consultant on the first movie. He didn't want to hear our ideas, and he didn't seem to have any ideas of his own. And the next thing you know, it just turned into something that wasn't close to Conan.
People bash George Clooney all the time for that lousy Batman movie that he was in. But you know what? Laurence Olivier could not elevate that movie.
Punisher came out in the 80s. That was horrible. That was bad for comics. I mean, everybody was so happy that was being made, then it came out and it was so bad.
I wasn't wild about the Conan movies, even though I was an advisor on one and co-wrote the second one.
But you take something, say, like the Hulk, I don't think that had the spirit of the Hulk comic.
I remember the first story I ever wrote of the Hulk. I think he's on the cover, he's knocking over a tank and so forth, and I said, that's the real Hulk. The scaled-down one, good as it was on TV, was not the real Hulk. The movie came closer.
And I think with Ang Lee taking his direction, he wanted to take the Hulk and add something to it. I think he went into it thinking, the Hulk is good, but I can make it better.
If somebody thinks they can really improve the comics, let them try that, see if it works. If somebody else thinks that fidelity to the comics is the best approach, which is mine, then let them do that.
Well, the problem is you can't make everyone happy. They try to make as many people as possible happy. But then it's also a script goes somewhere in Hollywood and 100 people touch it and it becomes this completely other thing that really had nothing to do with the original.
I think William Goldman, the esteemed, famous screenplay writer and so forth, was correct when he said back in his book in the 80s, nobody knows anything. If everybody knew anything, all these movies would all be hits, and they're not.
Why do they have to go to hell to get a movie? I'm sorry, but that's just me. They don't have to go to hell to get a movie. Mel Gibson went to heaven and got Passion.
Da 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 da.